Mastermind, Strategist for Hire, written by Clouds, My Head in the Clouds, Not Coming Down, and read by Eleanor Elizabeth. Chapter 11, The Daily Life of Mastermind. Be careful today. I don't want you getting hurt on the way to school, Inko fretted. Izuku rolled his eyes. Mum, I'll be fine. Aldera High School is literally a 10-minute walk. I don't even have to take the train. Inko brushed imaginary dust off the shoulders of his blue uniform. I know. It's just that there's so much more crime nowadays with Mastermind on the loose, and I just worry about you. You know that. Izuku sighed internally. Yeah, he knew that his mum worried. He also knew that she'd worry less if he'd been born with a quirk. He hid his frustration behind a smile. I gotta go, Mum. I don't want to be late for the first day of high school. She waved at him with the famous Midoriya tears in her eyes as he shouldered his backpack and walked down the road towards his new school. It had been pretty easy to get into. He'd applied a few other places, including a few that had a track that specialised in analysis and hero support. All of those had taken one look at the red quirkless written under his ID and promptly let him know that he wasn't the right fit for their schools. In the end, it was better this way. Going to a prestigious school would only bring attention, something that Izuku couldn't afford right now. The police hadn't tried to arrest him since he started the hostage situation, but he was almost certain that Nezu was working hard to try and uncover his identity. It's what Izuku would do. If they could find out who he was, then they might be able to find the computer program he'd hired Labrava to write that would release the murder plans if his arrest or death was ever trending on the internet. Or they'd go after Jiren, who also had instructions to release the plans if anything happened to him. But Izuku knew from experience that no one expected anything from a quirkless kid, especially one who didn't even stand up to his own bullies. If Izuku Midoriya was ever a suspect for Mastermind, his lack of quirk would instantly clear him of any suspicion. If the police looked past that, then the fact that none of his bullies had died mysteriously in the last year would be brought as evidence that he obviously wasn't capable of being a villain. What the police wouldn't know is that Izuku Midoriya, quirkless Deku, was a mask. And if they managed to look past all that, well, then they were smarter than Izuku gave them credit for, and maybe, just maybe, they deserved to arrest him. Hey Deku, haven't thrown yourself off a bridge yet? The bully, Makoto Ito, was big, stupid, and obviously trying to fill the void that Katsuki had left by going to UA, if the crowd of sycophants surrounding him was any indication. Izuku resisted the urge to glare at him. Hi, Ito. How are you doing today? It was amazing how quickly people saw weakness when Izuku stuttered. He smirked internally as Ito puffed his chest out and sneered at him. Don't try to be friends, Deku. You're worthless, and don't you forget it. With that, Ito shoved him to the ground and turned on his heel to enter the school, followed by his entourage. Izuku stood and brushed himself off. He'd gotten worse from Toga on their first day of training. He smiled as he thought of his friend. He'd have to remember all the dumb things his bully said and tell her later. She'd get a kick out of it, and they'd giggle about all the ways they'd kill the idiots. It was a good friendship. By the time Izuku got to class, he was back to wearing his mask of a weak, quirkless Deku, but underneath, he felt stronger than any of them. Izuku walked around the apartment and checked the security system one more time. From the outside, it looked like any apartment in the red light district, but the walls were heavily fortified and the security system could probably put UA to shame, and it was all his. Izuku sighed. He could finally stop smuggling his villain outfit out of the house and changing in Jiren's office. Nice digs, kid. Jiren leaned against the doorway in the kitchen. Thanks for finding me this place, Jiren. I feel like I finally made it, you know? Jiren chuckled. Sorry to have to tell you this, kid, but you made it a while ago. I can count on one hand the number of villains that have the balls to threaten the top 50 heroes on national television. Not to mention all of them at once. If you're not careful, they'll start calling you the #1 villain in Japan or some other bullshit. Well, it was always my dream to be like All Might. Why don't you just live here full time, kid? You don't have to keep living with your mother and doing the whole song and dance routine at school. like you're not one of the most powerful villains in Japan right now. Izuku pulled a soda out of the fridge. Disappearing would call too much attention to me right now. Missing posters, the police looking for me in 2 identities. There'd be too many chances for them to connect the two, and it would just be too much work when it's easier to just avoid the whole problem. Plus, I'm not ready to leave my mum yet. Despite how much she worries, I still love her, and she's been the only one who ever cared about me until last year. I don't want to put her through that, and I'd miss her too much. Jiren shrugged. Suit yourself. You ready for the meeting tonight? Izuku nodded. Just need to get dressed and I'll be on my way. I've been going to these meetings for months, Jiren. You don't have to worry about me. Jiren held up his hands in surrender. All right, I get it. You got your big boy breeches on and everything. I'll just be on my way. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Izuku crossed his arms. Jiren, would you have threatened all top 50 heroes? Jiren chuckled. Good point, kid. Have fun. He waved and walked out of the front door. Izuku went to the closet and pulled out his villain costume. Time to get back to work. Izuku walked into the Blue Dog's base with his head held high. The gang leader was already waiting for him. Mastermind. Pleasure to finally meet you. My name's Tanaka. Please, take a seat. Izuku sat in the chair offered. So, what can I do for you? Tenko ran his hand through his hair and smiled condescendingly, and Izuku tensed slightly. Something seemed off, but Izuku wasn't sure if there was something legitimately wrong, or if he was just among villains. We want to rob the Okane Bank. We're looking for a big haul. Izuku nodded. Should be doable. What are your quirks? One of the thugs snarled. What do you need to know our quirks for? Izuku rolled his eyes. Because it's normally advisable to use your quirks when robbing a bank. If you'd like a completely quirkless plan, I can do that, but most people don't go for that option, oddly enough. Once he'd decided that the thug had been sufficiently cowed, he turned back to Tanaka, who was still giving him that same smile that set Izuku's teeth on edge. That's just Takahashi for you. He's got a gas manipulation quirk. Allows him to control any gas, including the air in people's lungs. He? Tanaka jerked his thumb towards another thug standing in the corner of the room. Can see in the dark, and she... He pointed towards a woman leaning against the wall, playing with a knife. Can throw any knife with 100% accuracy. And I have a strength enhancement quirk. I can lift 3 times my own body weight. The heavier I am, the more I can lift. Izuku nodded. This matched up pretty well with the information he'd been able to gather before arriving. At least they weren't trying to lie to him. So, why did something feel off? All right. All that's left is the matter of my fee. Tanaka's smile turned wicked, and he pulled out a gun and levelled it at Izuku's head. How's this for a fee, pipsqueak? You give us the plan, and we let you walk out of here alive. Izuku looked around the room to find the other 2 men had their guns trained on him, and the woman with the knife-throwing quirk had 2 knives in each hand. He sighed. This explained why he'd been feeling off the whole meeting. He really should start listening to his gut more often. As he scanned the room, Izuku weighed his options. He could just fight his way out. He'd escaped pro-heroes before, but then again, the pro-heroes weren't trying to kill him. He eyed the woman with the knives. With her quirk, he'd be walking out of here with at least 1 stab wound. Not the end of the world, but something he'd prefer to avoid if possible. Stabs were harder to hide than bruises and burns, after all, and he'd rather not make his mum more worried. On the other hand, he could just give them the plans, but he didn't want word getting out that you could just threaten Mastermind rather than paying. It was bad for business. Izuku thought for another moment before deciding. It sounds like you have yourself a deal. Tanaka put away his gun and smiled. I knew you'd come around, pipsqueak. Now, how about you give us those plans? As Izuku wrote, he smiled wickedly beneath his mask. Yes, he'd let them have their plans. But a fat lot of good money would do them with what they had coming. Fun fact, everyone has enemies willing to pay to bring them down. Detective Sakashi, there's been an interesting development with the Akane Bank case. Sakashi gestured for the officer to continue. They're dead, sir. The detective did a double take. I'm sorry, what did you just say? The perpetrators of the robbery are all dead, the officer said. One was found strangled in his home alongside his family. Another seemingly died in a bar fight, although I doubt it's a coincidence. Another was found in a back alley, stabbed through the throat. The leader's body was left in front of the Channel 9 news station. He appeared to have been starved and tortured to death. All the murders were done by different people at different times. The only thing linking them was that they were all members of the Blue Dogs gang and that they robbed Akane Bank last week. Sakashi looked at the officer. And you think Mastermind's behind it? The officer shrugged. It was pretty obvious that he was behind the robbery, but why would he eliminate paying customers? Seems like a pretty bad business choice to me. I brought in a guy that had known dealings with the gang. Do you want to talk to him? Sakashi nodded absently and grabbed the files on Mastermind and the Akane Bank robbery. He walked into the interrogation room, set the files on the table, and sat down opposite the twitchy young man waiting for him. All right, let's get straight to the point. What can you tell me about the elimination of the Blue Dogs gang? The man rubbed his fingers together. He looked around the room like he was expecting threats to pop out the walls at any moment. It was their own fault. True. Sakashi tilted his head. What do you mean by that? They screwed over the wrong person. You mean Mastermind? Sakashi asked. The man nodded. Tanaka was never the type to play fair. He could screw you over to get $1 and he'd do it every time. Word is he tried that on Mastermind. Held a gun to his head and tried to get the plans for free. He rushed out. He should have just paid. You don't mess with Mastermind. True. Do you think he killed them to send the message? To his surprise, the man shook his head. Mastermind didn't kill him. True. Tanaka had enemies. They all did. But it wasn't a coincidence that their enemies suddenly knew their every weakness right after they pulled that shit. True. Sakashi stood. Thank you. You've been a big help. As soon as the door to the interrogation room closed, he sighed and rubbed his eyes. It took a major idiot to try and screw over someone who had managed to kill a hero while he was under police protection. He put the files back on the desk and stood. Maybe he should call Toshinori and go to dinner. Get away from this case for an hour or two. He nodded and grabbed his coat before calling his friend. At least Mastermind didn't know about Yagi Toshinori. Sakashi shuddered at what would happen if Mastermind figured out how weak All Might really was right now. But his friend had always been super careful with his identity, so they had nothing to worry about. Right? Hey guys, it's Ella, and I hope you're having a lovely day today. Oof, things are not looking good for my guy Toshinori. Who else thinks that he should be sleeping with one eye open and counting his fucking days? Hopefully you all liked this chapter. If you did, be sure to like the video, if you liked it, and to boost serotonin. Be sure to comment. We can gush about the thick. We can gush about anything you want. And subscribe if you want to be notified whenever I make new videos. Also, a nice little reminder that I will be doing a live stream next Saturday, the 3rd of December, and it is going to be at 11 GMT, which is 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Central, and 3 p.m. Pacific. For the Americans. If you're elsewhere, I'm sorry, I don't know what the other times were. These are the only ones I looked up. But hopefully I will see you all there. But until I see you again, be sure to practice some self-care. Your mum's back, and I've got threats worse than grounding this time. Yes, I brought you into this world and I can take you back out of it. If you are not, drinking your water. You need to be drinking all those cups. If you're not hydrated, you're going to struggle. You're going to struggle to sleep, which you should also be doing. Get to bed on time. and brush your teeth. 'Cause yes, this do be a threat. And I will catch you guys laters.